Hello, and welcome back to the 14th episode of Greek Speaks, I believe. So, long story short, it's fall break. No, it's winter break, and I wasn't able to record this episode in the normal setting, so I'm in my mom's classroom. So, if you hear random children screaming, that is why. If the audio quality is a little bit different, that's also why, because I'm in a bigger space. But this week we are talking about Apollo, the Sunshine Boy. Yay. To start off, he is the son of Zeus and Leto. Leto is a Titan. Twin sister is Artemis, who we already talked about. He was born on Delos because Hera cursed his mom to not be able to give birth to anywhere that was like concrete, like was anchored, and Delos wasn't at this point. So it was called a floating island, which I don't know exactly what. But so he has pretty significant ideals on Delos, especially in the before the classical period, because classical period is when Delos turns into a political money laundering scheme and this other thing, and it becomes way more than just Apollo. He has offspring. He has Asclepius with Kyrie, which we will get into, because that's one of my least favorite Apollo stories, because he's kind of a massive, just jerk in it, just plain and simple. And then Orpheus, who is the one who loses his wife and goes to the underworld to get her back. Hades is like, cool, just don't look at her. And then Orpheus proceeds to look at her. He has Orpheus with one of the muses, and the muses are these 9 goddesses of music and dance and theater and astronomy, and there's one that's like way out there, but I don't remember what it is. So his attributes, just how we can tell if it's a statue of Apollo or not. He's a beardless youth that gets into his ideas of that he's kind of like his sister. He's a transition from childhood to adulthood. He has longer hair, same thing. He has a bow quiver as one of his epithets. He's the archery god. He's a liar because he's one of the music gods. And he has laurel branches, which have to do with one of his love interests. His cult titles are, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this as always, Calthasius, which is the purifier, which goes back to his idea of a healing god. Musageles, which is the leader of the muses. We're going to go with that. Paeon, which is healer. Pythian, which is part of his oracle. It's called the Pythia. The individual person is the Pythia. But Pythian is just his idea of like an oracle god. And then Phoebus, which means bright, which goes back to his whole sun thing, which some people have very strong opinions on. He's not a sun god, and then some people are like, whatever, he's god of like 15 million different other things, so why not? I'm more in the camp of 15 million other different things, why not, but whatever. He also has a defined epithet of Apollo Soroctinos, which is lizard killer, which goes back to the idea of the Pythia, because he has to kill this gigantic snake which is called Python, which is why it's called Pythia, and where we get the word Python. So he has to kill that to establish his oracle. Read his Homeric hymn if you want to know more about that. So his rituals and sanctuary, he has Delphi, which is pretty famous, which is an oracle and is politically neutral in pretty much all of ancient Greece, from the Mycenaean to the fall of Rome. It's a pretty neutral area. Neutral being in like, if Argos was like, hey, should we go to war with Athens? Like, there's not going to be some sort of political or militaristic swaying of the oracle. And there's record of people doing that and getting in big trouble. He also has one on Delos, which I got a little bit into, which is his birthplace. And then he has one called the Hyacinthia, which is an initiation rite for boys, named after one of his lovers, who got beaten in the side of the head with a discus and died. Because, of course. He also is the idea of physicality for the aristocracy. He's fit, he's young, he's really attractive, that kind of thing. And so since he has that connection to the aristocracy, he becomes the god of the aristocracy, which was part of the reason why he kind of falls under favor in like 4th century, because of that whole, because long story short, in the 4th century, the philosophers are like, hey, all the gods are terrible people. Why are they the divine? And then all the gods that are somehow connected to humans directly become the main gods, like Aphrodite and Dionysus and Asclepius become really important. And I'll go into that more in the Dionysus and Aphrodite video. Kind of connected to him being an idea of the aristocracy, he represents order over chaos in the mortal realm, just like Zeus represents order over chaos in the immortal realm. Yeah, so he kind of portrays calm and strength and that kind of stuff. He's also a god of the arts. He is, singing and dancing, and there's an entire part of the Hermes Homeric hymn that Hermes gives him a lyre to, kind of drop the charges of Hermes stealing his cattle, and they become buddies, and it's funny. One thing that was really interesting about Apollo that I had never heard of was Apollo Smintheus, which is the Lord of Mice, which I'm like, you have to have a god for everything. Okay, then. He's referenced in the Iliad a little bit because in the beginning of the Iliad, his first act of business is to rain a plague down on the Greek camp. And Apollo, yes, is a healing god, but he can also bring plague. And what do mice bring? They bring plague. And so they kind of figured out there's a connection between plague and mice and the god, and yeah. So there's one a temple directly to Apollo Smintheus in the south of Troy. It has art depictions from the Iliad, and there's a story of colonizers from Crete going somewhere, and mice kept eating leather bits off of stuff, and so they built a temple to Apollo to, I guess, kill the mice or something. That was just a really funny, like, oh, that makes sense. I never thought of that. Ancient Greek healing, like tools for doctors, they would have like little mice and stuff inscribed on them. It's very funny to me. Part of the reason that Apollo is so far down on the list is he has a lot of lovers, and a lot of them are technically rape. One is just like the worst thing ever, and I'll get to her in a second. But so beginning off, we have Daphne, who turns into a laurel tree because she decides she doesn't want Apollo's affection, and her dad's a river god, and so she like runs toward the river while Apollo is chasing her, and she's like, "Dad, get me out of here!" And so the dad turns her into a tree because why not? And so that's why laurel is sacred to Apollo, is because he takes the leaves off the tree and like weaves them into a crown. There's also Cassandra, who's a Trojan princess. She didn't want to have a relationship with Apollo, and so Apollo gives her the gift of prophecy, but the catch is nobody believes her, and this is pretty famously played out in part of the Trojan War when the Trojans are bringing the Trojan horse into the city, and Cassandra's like, hey, this is a trap, like, you're all gonna die, just casually, and they're like, shut up, it's fine, and then they all die, because there's a bunch of angry Greeks in the horse. You'd think after, like, 3 times, they'd be like, okay, let's listen to her, but no. So there's a Hyacinthus, which is connected to that festival that I mentioned. He's a dude, because all of the Greek gods are gay. Everything's gay. This is like one of my favorite ancient Greek death stories too. It happens twice, just casually. So Apollo and Hyacinthus are playing discus, and the wind picks up the discus that Apollo throws and just beans Hyacinthus in the side of the head with it and kills him. And this happens twice. This happens with Perseus' grandfather, which we'll get to in a couple weeks. And it happens to this guy. There's this quote from an old TV show when I was a kid, and it was like, if I had a nickel for every time that happened, I'd have 2 nickels. That's not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Like, I feel like he's like peak this, which is really funny. Also, he has a girlfriend named Corinos, sleeps with another mortal, and then a crow, who is white at this point, tells Apollo, and Apollo kills the girlfriend and saves the baby, and then turns the crow black, which I'm like, 1, don't punish the crow. Like, the crow is not a villain in this story. 2, why did you kill her? Why? Like, I get why, because you're a Greek god and you're all very temperamental, but wow. Anyway, the baby grows up to become Asclepius, who's the god of healing. That's another weird, like, oh, it happened twice, is I killed my girlfriend but saved the baby, because it happens with Dionysus and Semele and Zeus. I guess at some point you run out of stories and you have to recycle. Who knows? Okay, so he's also the god of oracles. The Homeric hymn to Apollo is pretty much just a quest story of him trying to set up his own oracle. So in the Oracle of Delphi, you'd go in, you'd sacrifice a goat. It would be a meat for a priestess. It would be priests. It would be your payment to see the oracle, and it would also be a sacrifice to Apollo. So the oracle would. So the Pythia is physically the oracle, and so she would go into a trance. We don't really know what it is. One theory was that there was a natural gas leak like right under the temple, and it would just like cause fumes to come up, and it's so funny to me, but it's false. So anyway, so she would go into swim source trance, and the priests around her would write down what she says and interpret it, and then give you your prophecy. And so we have lead tablets with those written on them. There was also clairvoyancy, which is kind of like reading tea leaves. There was interpretation of signs, religious prescriptions, yes, no from the gods. And then there are also, one instance that he was used a lot, especially in the 8th century, was Apollo Archegetes, which they would go to Apollo and just be like, hey, a city would go to Apollo and just be like, hey, should we do a colony, and who should lead it, and where should it be, and that is used a lot. There's a couple other well-known oracles. There's Claros, which is also a temple to Apollo, and then there's Dodona, which is a big oak forest, which is sacred to Zeus, which is an oracle to Zeus. And then there's one at Epira. I'm going to say it's Epira. I don't know if that's correct. And that's the Necronomicon, which is dead people. So you would get a prescription from the dead, and that's probably connected to Hades. The gods communicate through epiphany and oracles and dreams and divination. So Hyrospousi, which is gutting an animal, looking at its liver, and depending on how the liver looks, it'll tell you what you need to know. And then there's also auspices, which is omens and birds and lightning. So weirdly enough, the gods of the Greek pantheon also communicate kind of in the same way as the god of Abrahamic faiths. So that is Apollo. As always, we have the Instagram at Greek Speaks. And as always, if you guys want me to talk about a certain myth, leave it down in the comments, and I'll see if I can get to it. Have a good week.